All right, we'll get it started. So, today we are talking about don't push my buttons, how leaders trigger workplace stress. And I'll be honest, I get a lot of calls from people. Megan, our people, they're disengaged, they're stressed out. Can you help us? And absolutely, I love to joke. I can come in, I can do your yoga class, we can do a nutrition, we can do stress management. But at the crux, I like to get to the root. What is the thing that is causing the stress in the workplace? And a lot of times it's leaders, it's managers, they're triggering these stress responses and they don't even know that they're really doing it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Megan Wollerton. I run Life Force Wellness. I work with individuals and organizations to create psychologically safe work environments, provide employee wellness, and leadership training like what you're going to get today. I currently hold certifications as a personal trainer, health coach, nutrition coach, corporate wellness specialist, a positive psychology practitioner, and a stress management, sleep, and recovery coach. I'm also currently working on an advanced certification in change psychology, which means the more I learn, the more I have to share. So be on the lookout for new material. I did not always work in health and wellness. I actually came from the oil and gas industry. So I've been on the other side in the industry where I was working 60 to 100 hours a week. I was on call 24/7. And I understand what it's like to be on both sides, to try to manage teams that have that expectation of them while also being one of the team players that has to rise to those occasions. So, today we're going to talk a little bit about why your teams feel on edge. Everyone just seems stressed out, burned out, and this isn't anything new. We've been talking burnout for quite a while. And what I see in workplaces today is constant change. I mean, we are in this constant flux, with the economy and tariffs and coming out of a pandemic. And are we returning to the office? Are we hybrid? Are we doing layoffs? What is going on? There's so much change, and that causes so much uncertainty. There's a lot of companies that have had to do layoffs in the last year. And now a lot of employees are just overloaded with work because there's not enough people to handle the workloads that are being brought in. There's a lot of digital pressure. So, especially in those hybrid and remote work environments, to be on Teams, on Slack channels, on Zoom calls, just all the apps, all the things, it can be really overwhelming. And then emotional exhaustion to try to show up, to be happy, to be, pleasant to be around, to keep that smile on your face and the customer service voice is completely draining. And to a lot of managers and leaders and business owners, they look at their employees that are dealing with these things and what they might see or interpret that stress to be is laziness. They seem defensive, they seem disengaged. And so I've heard a lot of talk lately on, hey, our employees are really disengaged, morale is low. Can you come in? Can you do something? And what we need to recognize is what you're seeing is often a stress response, and that we need to really get to the root cause of that stress. We need to understand that as leaders, we're not just managing people, we're also managing their nervous systems. It's our job to make sure that our employees are having a thriving brain experience and they're not in survival brain mode, that they're in an environment where they can be productive, think creatively, and not just be trying to get through the day. In order to do that, we need to understand stress. But I want us to have a new appreciation for stress. And some of you who have taken my webinars in the past, you have heard me tell this story that if it had not been for stress, we would have died off as a species a long time ago. If you take yourself back to your ancestors and all they had was a sharp stick and they're wandering the savannah and they're foraging for food and a lion jumps out at them, enter stress response, what we commonly call fight or flight mode. And this is where we get that rush of adrenaline and cortisol, and our muscles tighten, our heart races, we're pumping blood to everything, our senses are becoming sharper, our breathing quickens. And I don't know about you, if I'm about to either fight a lion or run away from one, these are all the things I want my body to do in order to survive. Now, most of us are not dealing with lions, tigers, and bears, oh my, on our way to the office. So, why are we so stressed out? Well, what we learned is that if I, with my sharp stick, go out with 10 of my buddies who also have sharp sticks and we're foraging for food and a lion jumps out at us, 10 people versus one lion is much greater odds. My chances of surviving increase, plus, we might eat really well that night. And if you want to be really dark, I only have to run one of my friends to survive. So no matter if I'm taking flight or fighting, my chances of survival increase exponentially when I am part of a tribe or a community. And so our brains have actually become wired to become part of a tribe. There is this one theory, and it's starting to phase out, but I think it's good for simplifying the basics of the brain, is this triune brain model. And it said that as we were evolving, we started with our reptilian brain, our primal brain, that's the basal ganglia. That's the ooh, fire's hot, gray clouds mean rain, sun rises in the morning, finding those basic patterns. Then we have what's known as the paleo mammalian brain or the emotional brain. That's our limbic system. That's where we develop deep emotions. That's what helped us connect with other people. That's when we started to form those tribes and those communities with one another. And then came our neo-mammalian, our rational brain, prefrontal cortex, higher problem solving. Think like that's when we started developing agriculture. So that's how our brain developed. So our brains are wired for social connection. And that is the biggest stressor we have is around social stress. Now, when it comes to our stress response, we typically know fight or flight, but there are actually four stress responses. Some of you may have heard of freeze, but there's a fourth one that I think shows up in the workplace more than any of the others, and that's fawn. And that's one that I think leaders need to be very in tune to. So, looking at each one of these closely, fight mode. So, I get triggered, something stressful happens, and I think now I need to confront this head on. I'm confronting the threat head on. I'm going to fight it. And so this shows up as employees who are angry, they're irritable, they lash out, maybe they send passive aggressive emails, they feel the need to control every situation, they don't want to relinquish control, maybe they're verbally or even physically aggressive. If you have an employee who that sounds like, understand they might not just be a difficult employee, they might be in survival mode. And their internal messaging is screaming, if you fight hard enough, you'll survive. And so we need to understand that when we see these patterns come up in our employees, it's under stress. The next one is flight. So, this is when they get triggered and they immediately think, I need to escape or avoid this danger. And so, this frequently shows up as anxiety or panic. These are your employees who are overworking, over planning, over explaining. They tend to avoid confrontation or people altogether. So, these are the employees that skip the meetings, or even worse, turn in their 2 weeks' notice because they're in survival mode. And their internal message is if I just run fast enough, I'll be safe. If I can just get out of this horrible, threatening experience, this environment, I will survive. So that's flight. The next one is freeze. So this is like playing possum. I'm going to play dead. I want to become unnoticeable. And this one, I think a lot of managers and leaders misread because it looks like disassociation or feeling numb. It looks like employees who have difficulty making decisions. It shows up as procrastination or shutting down. And so, a lot of times, this is where the conversation starts on my employees are lazy. They don't know how to manage their time. They wait till the last minute. They're disengaged. They're not go getters. They're not getting after it. Is it that? Or are they in survival mode and their internal messaging is if I don't move, maybe the danger will pass? Because a lot of times, if I'm not really sure what to do, I don't want to make a mistake, I have a fear, I'm under some kind of threat of, being reprimanded or fired, maybe if I just ignore it, it will go away. Or if it's really important, they'll bring it up again. So sometimes that disassociation, that disengagement from employees is really them in survival mode and they're having a freeze response. The last one that not many people talk about is fawn. Now, we tend to see this and think about it in very extreme cases. Think like a domestic violence case where they want to appease the person so that they don't get injured, so that they don't get harmed. And so, if I appease the threat, I can avoid the danger. And so, this looks like people pleasing. And so, these are your people that say yes to everything. They completely ignore their own needs. They prioritize your needs first to the point of full on self neglect and emotional breakdown. So, this might be that employee that you're thinking, like, oh no, they're great. Every time I come to them, they're willing to take on a project. They're willing to do this thing. They're willing to go the extra mile. What you need to ask yourself is that person going the extra mile because they are really into the project, that they are, therefore they're committed. They're committed to the company, they're committed to the cause, or are they doing it out of compliance? That I'm trying to be compliant to avoid the harm. And that's the question that we need to figure out. And that requires having deep conversations with our employees. But their internal messaging when they're in fawn is if I just keep everyone happy, I'll be safe. So this may also show up as the employee that cracks jokes when things get tense because they're just trying to like alleviate that tension. So we do see this one show up a lot of times in corporate America, but we don't like to really raise any red flags about it because we like the fact that the employee always says yes. But if they're saying it out of compliance because of fear and not out of commitment to the company and the cause, then this can really turn into something like fight or flight very quickly over time. So, what are these main social stress triggers? So, Dr. David Rock is a neuroscientist who developed the SCARF model, where he looked at all the different social stress triggers and the things that really gave that threat response. And he was able to boil it down to five main social stress triggers. And it fills out this acronym SCARF. And it stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Now, we've heard of good stress and bad stress. And good stress, we tend to move towards things, it's rewards. Bad stress, we move away from. Those are the threats. Because we only have 30 minutes today, we're only going to look at the threats because I want you to be aware of what are those things that are triggering that threat and trauma response that we're seeing in the workplace that look like disengagement or laziness or whatever else. So, the first one, status. Ask yourself, do I feel respected, competent, and valued here? That's what status is about. In most companies, we have an organizational chart, and I know where I fit on that chart. And if I'm a VP or a mid level manager, am I treated like a manager? Or do I have no real powers? Am I always being overlooked, overshadowed? My status really means nothing here. So, examples of threats that come up commonly are public criticism, dismissing their ideas, interrupting them when they talk, or talking down to them. These are things that trigger a fight, flight, freeze, fawn response. A good shift you can make is make sure that when you have to criticize or correct a behavior, you do it privately. That's a huge shift. Employees that are called out on the carpet in the middle of meetings or in the middle of a busy office, you're going to trigger a stress response. Make sure you do those things privately. However, when it comes to recognizing their efforts, those things should be done publicly. So when you go to an employee, hey, I really appreciate how you handled that situation, that absolutely should be done in public, but any kind of criticism should be done privately. The next one is certainty. So, do I know what's expected of me? Do I know what's coming next? So, examples of things that will trigger a stress response under certainty are the unclear expectations, poor communication, constant changes in the workplace, surprise meetings or inspections. So, one shift you can make is just clarify, clarify, clarify. Don't feel like you're over explaining anything. Put it into writing. Give them a clear agenda of what we're going to be discussing in today's meeting. Let them know what the expectations are of the job. One thing I deal with a lot of my personal coaching clients is they come to me and they're like, I don't know how to prioritize my day because my boss has red flagged everything. Like they've come to me and gone, this is a priority. This is a priority. This is urgent. This needs done. Help your employees out, actually label them. This is priority one. This is priority two. This is priority three. Because I'm working with your employees on the side going, okay, go back to your boss and say, hey, boss, you gave me five things that are all super urgent and need done by 3 p.m., but I am one person and it's already noon. What absolutely needs to get done today? And what can I delegate to someone else or put off until tomorrow morning? Help your employees figure that out by being clear with what the expectations are and what is an actual priority. Not everything should be urgent, red flagged, and important. Next is autonomy. Think of like a child. I want to do it by myself. You would think we would outgrow that, but it actually gets worse because as adults, we believe I should have some level of control on how I do my job, how I do my work. I'm an adult. I've been trained for this. I've been doing this job for X many years. The things that trigger this is micromanagement, not allowing flexibility, and trying to control every single process. Now, I understand some processes, due to compliance and safety, absolutely need to be followed to the T. However, you might have other processes that you are forcing down on your employees that don't necessarily need to be there. So, just finding where you can give that flexibility. Also, the micromanagement. A lot of employees view that return to office as nothing more than an overreach of you just want to look over my shoulder and micromanage me more. It's not that you want us to collaborate and build teamwork. You just want to keep looking over my shoulder. And if that's the feeling they have, is that you're bringing them into the office so you can micromanage them more, of course, they're going to turn in their 2 weeks' notice before they ever make it into the office. One of the things you can do is give them choice. People support what they help create. Bring them in part of that process. Hey, of our standard operating procedure or this process, what would you like to change? What's working? How do you think we could do this differently? Have those conversations. It works with children and it works with adults. My son, 8 years old, does not like to eat his vegetables. But if I go to him and say, hey, buddy, do you want carrots or do you want broccoli? I'll tell you right now, he doesn't want either. But when I give him the choice and he says carrots, he's more likely to eat the carrots at dinner without fighting me because it was his choice. So find ways where you can give employees choice. Hey, I have these two big projects that need to get done today. Do you want to work on A or B? I'll give B to maybe someone else the next time they get the chance to choose. But anytime you get an opportunity to give them a choice or to have some kind of input into the process and the procedure, it's going to lower the temperature of the stress. Next is relatedness. I've already talked about the importance of being part of a tribe and a community. And I love Brene Brown's research on this that the opposite of belonging is fitting in. So if you want to know how your employees really feel, ask them, do you feel like you belong or are you trying to fit into the culture here? That's going to be massively telling. Your people should feel like they belong and they are part of the team. Areas that will trigger a stress response here is anytime your employee feels invisible and they don't feel like they're part of the team and they're left out. They're not in on the communication, they're not part of the email, they got left out of the meeting. Those kinds of things are absolutely going to trigger a stress response. When you get those little clicks forming into the office, when it doesn't seem like you trust them or they have no trust in you because you've broken it somewhere, or when leaders are disconnected from the teams. If you're in your ivory tower and they don't get to really talk to you and they don't know anything about you, the leadership of the company, and there's that disconnect, they don't feel a sense of belonging. So, some of the things you can do is find ways to connect. And what we have found in research is it doesn't take anything massive. It can be something simple. You find out you like the same sports teams, you watch the same shows, you have kids about the same age and similar activities, you whatever, you like the same way, your cheeseburger the same way. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but find ways you can make connections. People who have things that are similar to us They start to be in our brains, almost sit like they're part of our tribe. Oh, you like what I like. You're part of my community. You and I have this in common. Finding those commonalities, connecting, having those conversations, those are the things that are going to help build that relatedness. Start small and build from there. One of the things I teach in some of my other workshops is the trust equation, which is built on credibility, reliability, and intimacy over self orientation. Not enough time to dive into that, but just thinking about how you show up credibly. Do you show up when you say you're going to show up? How well do your employees actually know you, and how well do you actually know them? And are you getting to know them for their benefit or your benefit? So, how can you create connection? Lastly, is fairness. Am I being treated justly and consistently? So, this model came out before we ever had the equity and equality kind of conversations. So, we're going to just stick with that consistency, that when we have a policy, is it applied consistently, or are we playing favorites? Because having that favorite employee who seems like they can get away with anything is going to trigger that stress response. If there's inconsistent standards, that these people get these things and those people get those things, that's going to cause division and stress. Unclear on how to get promotions. How do I actually move up the chain? What do you need to see from me? What are the metrics that I should be tracking? How do I know when I'm ready to go for that promotion? How do I know how raises are calculated? Transparency is key here. If you want to reduce the stress around fairness, what are the policies? What are the standards? What are the requirements to get to that next level? And be very clear and make sure that they're being applied consistently across the company. So, how do we reduce friction? I've given you some leadership shifts that you can make based on each one, but it really comes down to better communication and focusing on the de escalation of that stress. So, a lot of times we already misinterpret laziness, attitude problems, or lack of caring or disengagement as being a worker problem. They're just not a good worker. Sometimes we'll throw it on a specific generation or a stereotype, and what we need to understand is that's not usually the case. Usually, what you're seeing is a nervous system overload. You're seeing somebody struggling with uncertainty, with fear, with one of these social threats. And so, if you can take a step back as the leader and go, okay, something has triggered them. I need to get to the bottom of it. You can start having that conversation and figure out, is it their status? Is it autonomy? Do they not feel related? Do they don't feel like they're being treated fairly? What is it that's being triggered here so that we can actually get to the root cause of it and help them? How we do that is we clarify the expectations. Be very, very clear. What are the expectations for the job? What you have for them? Give choices where you can. Ask before assuming. If anything, assume they don't know what they're doing. Don't just assume, oh, they got this, they can handle it. I'm going to just throw out this email and assume they know exactly what I want. Never assume that. Make sure you ask the open ended questions. Make sure that they are comfortable to take on the task. Make sure they're not just saying yes out of compliance, but it's because of a commitment. Normalize feedback. So, one of the other things I teach is an SBI framework, how to give good feedback. So, how do we give process praise? And how do we give criticism? And how do we correct behavior in a way that builds people up? One of those is SBI. So, that's talk about the situation, the behavior, and the impact. A lot of times we'll say the situation, hey, on yesterday's call, the behavior, you kept interrupting me, but we never talk about the impact, that, caused the conversation to stall. It caused me to get off track. Talk about the impact. It's usually like, hey, yesterday on the call, you kept interrupting me, knock it off. Talk about the impact. I'll get more into that on another webinar. But how do we normalize giving feedback? If you're not comfortable giving your employees feedback, correcting their behavior, giving criticism, then I highly encourage you to look at some new ways, look at some new frameworks on how to do that. The compliment sandwich, it's got to go. That's old. Get rid of that. Recognize your employees' efforts. Give process praise. What exactly is it your employees are doing that you're thankful for? Because if you aren't specific with what it is that they did, then your, hey, good job, high five seems very ingenuine and it's not really helping the situation. And then lastly, create a psychologically safe environment. What does that mean? That is an environment where an employee feels okay to raise their hand and say, hey, I made a mistake, or hey, I really need help, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm not sure what to prioritize right now. If your employees feel safe to do that without being ridiculed, retaliated against, bullied, made fun of, then you have a good environment. But there are certain environments where they're afraid to raise their hand because of retaliation or because of ridicule. So look at the type of environment that you have created. Do they feel safe to raise their hand and speak up when they need that assistance? The final takeaway for today really is that people perform better when they feel safe, respected, informed, and trusted. And one of the things I really hate is these kinds of trainings, how our brain works, how we trigger stress, so very basic to our well being and how we function in a tribe, in a community, in an organization. They're always called soft skills. And they're always seen by, I feel like, leaders as being very fluffy. And what I want you to get away from this is these kinds of skills, understanding how people's brains work, what triggers stress, how we can de escalate it, just these little shifts that we can make. They're not soft, they're strategic, and we should absolutely be investing in helping our employees to learn, what it is that makes them tick, what is it that triggers them, so that they themselves can even recognize on, oh, I'm upset right now because they triggered my status. Sometimes we need to say the thing in order to calm ourselves. And so learning these skills and practicing them and getting everyone speaking the same language is really helpful for creating a really productive, optimized work environment. We're almost out of time, but I want to let you know that if you want more, I do offer leadership workshops, focused on prevention, things like this. We offer coaching. I offer monthly webinars to leaders and to employees. I really believe in a two-pronged approach to a wellness program that you should be working with the employees and with the leaders. If you want to book a call, you can scan that QR code. If you would like to learn more about how to give process praise, how to give feedback in a way that builds people up, if you're not comfortable giving feedback, our next leadership workshop is going to be Wednesday, May 20th at 12:30. It's called Praise Junkies to Growth Leaders. So those people that are always looking for compliments, how do we get them off of that compliment addiction? How do we give feedback in a way that builds them up? We're going to go over that, and that is posted on Eventbrite, so you can find it there. At this time, I want to open it up to any questions that you may have. If you're not comfortable asking a question, unmuting, or in the chat, you're welcome to reach out to me privately through my email. And then always connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to share resources, show whenever we're going to do these new webinars. I try to do a free one every week, and you can book a consult call with the link there. So at this time, I'll open it up if anyone has any questions or any key takeaways, anything you really liked about this workshop today.
Maybe one small comment. I think it's great that we move away from thinking about this as something that is a soft skill, like you just mentioned in the last few minutes. Because as a female leader, I was always like one specific thing that people expected from me, and then as opposed to from other people. And then obviously, if you don't fulfill that, then you're called bossy or whatever. And I just like that as a whole, we understand that this is really important as a leader, and you don't have to be authoritative. You don't have to, just be this bossy person, but that you can be a mix, and it doesn't matter if you're male or female. So I really like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That's something I felt. Like I said, I worked in oil and gas, and like there was always that need to be like just a little bit harder, right? Like when you're in that kind of field that like you don't want to seem soft, but that's why I don't like that they're called soft skills. I'm happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. I hope to see you on the next webinar, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.